In 2026, the experience of air travel has shifted in subtle but significant ways, and if you haven't picked up on it, that's part of the issue. Across airports in the United States, the TSA has quietly phased out traditional X-ray machines in favor of advanced CT scanners equipped with artificial intelligence. Unlike earlier models, these new systems don't just take a quick look inside your bag. They assess materials with remarkable precision, examining everything from density and shape to internal wiring and chemical traces. A simple battery or a circuit board no longer goes unnoticed. The technology instantly identifies, measures, and compares each item, flagging anything unusual within moments. What many travelers don't realize is that the core regulations haven't shifted. What's changed is how strictly they're enforced. Everyday objects that once passed through security without a second thought are now triggering alerts. The leniency of the past is gone. In 2026, if something appears suspicious, it's immediately pulled aside. If it can't be quickly identified and cleared, it's confiscated on the spot. Flying in 2026 feels different, and if you haven't noticed yet, that's exactly the problem, because across the United States, the TSA has quietly replaced old X-ray machines with hospital-grade CT scanners powered by AI that don't just glance into your bag anymore but analyze density, shape, wiring, and chemical signatures with unsettling precision, measuring every battery, circuit, and unfamiliar object and flagging them in seconds. And here's the twist most travelers miss. The rules didn't suddenly change, but enforcement did, meaning items that slipped through security for years are now lighting up TSA screens in bright red with no warning phase and no more letting things slide. So in 2026, if something looks questionable, it's pulled, and if it can't be verified instantly, it's gone, and the consequences are brutal, with passengers losing expensive electronics, missing flights, and watching hundreds of dollars drop straight into TSA disposal bins, all because they packed something they've carried dozens of times before, driven by a zero-tolerance era with scanners that see more than humans ever could, which is why we're breaking down the electronics most likely to be confiscated in 2026 so you don't become the next traveler standing at the checkpoint stunned, arguing over gear you'll never get back, starting with smart luggage. The $400 mistake that ends before takeoff, those sleek suitcases with built-in chargers and tracking features that feel like a travel upgrade but are actually one of the fastest ways to lose hundreds of dollars before your trip even begins, because the rule here is brutally simple and completely non-negotiable. Any smart luggage with a non-removable lithium-ion battery is banned, not sometimes, not depending on the airport, but banned from the cargo hold and banned from carry-on. Full stop, and the reason is simple. Fire risk. Because lithium-ion batteries can enter thermal runaway without warning, and if that happens in the cargo hold, the crew cannot reach it, which is a scenario aviation authorities will not gamble with, which is why the FAA and TSA treat this rule as black and white, and this is exactly where travelers get trapped, showing up with $300 to $500 suitcases only to be told at check-in that the battery can't fly, like one traveler who lost her bag because the battery technically was removable but only with a screwdriver, and she didn't have time, so she missed her flight or ditched the suitcase, with no exceptions, no sympathy, and no flexibility, meaning the only fix is preventative. Before you pack, check the battery because you must be able to remove it by hand without tools, and if you can, pull it out and carry the battery in the cabin, but if you can't, don't bring the suitcase at all, because in 2026, smart luggage is either compliant or it's a guaranteed confiscation waiting to happen, which brings us to number 2. Power banks, the silent confiscation nobody sees coming, since almost everyone flies with a power bank now for their phone, tablet, and headphones, and it feels harmless, which is exactly why so many travelers get caught off guard in 2026, as the new TSA scanners are exceptionally good at spotting battery density, and power banks are lighting them up instantly. But the rule isn't about size, it's about watt hours, and most people have no idea what theirs actually is, so here's the hard line. Power banks under 100 watt-hours are generally allowed but only in your carry-on, and every spare lithium-ion battery including power banks is strictly forbidden in checked luggage, because if it's found there, it's getting pulled, while for larger power banks between 101 and 160 watt-hours, airline approval is required before you fly, And anything over 160 watt-hours is completely banned, but now comes the twist that's catching people off guard. If a TSA officer cannot clearly read the watt-hour rating, they are trained to confiscate the device. No visible label means no way to verify safety, and no verification means it doesn't fly, so that expensive laptop power bank is gone, that off-brand backup charger with faded text is gone, because officers are not guessing anymore, and if they can't confirm it on the spot, it goes into the bin, and the fix is simple but unforgiving. Buy reputable brands that clearly print watt-hours, and if the label is worn, reprint it and tape it on, and no matter what, carry on only, because in 2026, power banks don't get warnings, they get taken, which brings us to number 3. Loose spare batteries, the photographer's hidden trap, because if you travel with cameras, drones, or any serious tech, this is where a lot of experienced travelers get burned, as spare lithium-ion batteries feel like common sense and extra power means fewer problems until TSA sees them the wrong way in 2026, and the rule itself hasn't changed, but enforcement has become ruthless, meaning all spare lithium-ion batteries are banned from checked luggage, every single one with no exceptions, and the reason is simple and dangerous. Loose batteries can short-circuit if their metal terminals touch other objects in a cargo hold, which can cause heat buildup and fire, and that's a risk TSA will not tolerate, but here's where travelers still lose them. Even in carry-on bags, you are required to protect the battery terminals, meaning original packaging, taped terminals, individual plastic bags, or proper battery cases all work, while what doesn't work is tossing loose batteries into a pouch and hoping for the best, because the new CT scanners can identify the chemical signature of batteries instantly, and when they see multiple unprotected cells grouped together, that's an automatic bag check, and if they're found in checked luggage, they'll be confiscated without you even being present, and you'll just find a TSA notice when you land, which is why photographers and drone pilots are hit hardest since they carry more batteries than the average traveler, and in 2026, I didn't know, doesn't slow the process down at all, so if your spare batteries aren't protected and in your carry-on, you're already playing a losing game. Number 4 is cordless hair tools, where the rules get unpredictable, and this one catches people off guard, especially travelers who've flown with the same item for years without an issue, because cordless hair tools like curling irons, straighteners, and compact travel stylers look innocent, but in 2026, these devices are getting flagged more often than ever, and the reason depends on how they're powered. First, the lithium-ion models, which like other battery-powered electronics are best packed in your carry-on, but that's not enough because TSA also looks at accidental activation, and if an officer believes the tool could turn on and heat up inside your bag, they can take it with no lock, no case, no protection, and that's all it takes, but now comes the confusing part. Butane-powered tools, because technically TSA allows one butane-powered hair tool in your carry-on and only if it has a safety cover over the heating element, while spare gas cartridges are completely forbidden, and here's the twist, enforcement is wildly inconsistent. Some airlines ban these tools entirely, and some TSA officers aren't comfortable with the rule at all, as travelers have reported losing perfectly allowed butane curlers simply because the officer didn't want to take the risk, and that's the key word in 2026, risk. Because if an officer is unsure, the item doesn't fly, period, so to avoid the gamble, stick to corded hair tools when you travel or use a lithium-ion version, lock it, case it, and keep it in your carry-on, because anything else is a roll of the dice, which brings us to number 5, vapes and e-cigarettes. Where there's zero tolerance and no second chances, because if you vape, this is one rule you cannot bend, not even slightly, since in 2026, vapes and e-cigarettes are one of the highest priority items for TSA and the FAA, and the policy around them is absolute. You can never pack a vape, e-cigarette, or electronic smoking device in your checked luggage, ever, as this isn't a warning level rule but a zero tolerance policy, and the reason is a double risk. Lithium-ion batteries and liquids, because batteries can overheat and liquids can leak. Together, they're treated as a serious fire hazard in the cargo hold, so here's the only way they're allowed, vapes must be in your carry-on or on your person, and even then, TSA requires you to take steps to prevent accidental activation by powering the device off, locking it, or removing the battery if possible. while vape liquids fall under the 311 rule, meaning bottles must be 3.4 ounces or 100 milliliters or smaller and placed in a single quart-sized bag, because anything larger doesn't make it through. And now the twist most travelers ignore: if TSA finds a vape in your checked bag, you don't get a warning, you don't get to explain, it gets removed and you'll discover it's gone only when you open your suitcase at your destination. And one more warning. While TSA allows vapes in carry-on bags, many other countries don't, as some ban them entirely, so flying internationally with a vape can escalate from confiscation to fines very quickly, which means in 2026, the rule is brutally simple: carry-on only, secured, or expect to lose it. And that brings us to number 6, electric razors. Why harmless grooming tools are getting flagged. For decades, electric razors were the definition of a safe travel item where you could toss it in the bag, forget about it, and move on. But in 2026, that assumption is getting people stopped because the new CT scanners don't see an electric razor. They see a dense cylinder with a battery, wiring, and a motor, and that combination now triggers extra scrutiny, and most of the time a modern, clean, name-brand razor passes. But here's where travelers lose them: older models, off-brand devices, razors with cracked casing, tape, swelling, corrosion, or loose parts, because on the scanner, those details matter, and if the device looks damaged or tampered with, TSA pulls the bag, and once it's out, the officer has to decide one thing: is this clearly safe? And if the answer isn't an immediate yes, they're trained to err on the side of caution. And that's when confiscation happens, not because razors are banned, but because the officer can't confidently identify the device as non-threatening, and arguing doesn't help. The final decision belongs to the officer standing there, so in 2026, it's just a razor isn't a defense, and the safest move is simple: travel with a razor that looks clean, intact, and obviously factory made. Because if it looks beat up, repaired, or questionable, you're rolling the dice, and TSA isn't obligated to roll it with you, which brings us to number 7, electric toothbrushes. And the vibration that gets them taken, because electric toothbrushes are allowed, and that's what makes this one so frustrating, since in 2026, electric toothbrushes are getting extra attention at security not because they're banned, but because of how they look and behave inside your bag. As on a CT scanner, a toothbrush appears as a dense tube packed with a motor, wiring, and a lithium-ion battery, and if that image isn't perfectly clear, it's automatically treated as a suspicious electronic device, with two things triggering confiscation more than anything else. First, accidental activation, because if your toothbrush turns on inside your bag, buzzing, vibrating, and shifting other items, that combination with a strange CT image is an instant red flag, and officers don't wait to see what it is. They pull the bag, inspect it, and if they're not fully comfortable, it's gone. While the second condition is cracks, tape, corrosion near the charging port, or a handle that looks repaired or modified, because from TSA's perspective, that stops being a toothbrush and starts looking like a homemade electronic device with a battery inside, and homemade electronics are exactly what the scanners are trained to isolate. The fix is boring but effective: use a hard travel case that covers the power button, pack it where it won't get crushed, and don't bring old, beat-up handles that look like they've been through years of repairs, because in 2026, clean, intact, and clearly normal is the only version that consistently survives security, which brings us to number 8, drones. And how expensive gear gets left behind, because drones are one of the fastest ways to lose serious money at the airport if you don't follow the rules exactly, and on paper, TSA allows drones in both carry-on and checked luggage, but in reality, checking a drone is one of the worst mistakes you can make in 2026, and the reason again comes down to batteries, since spare lithium-ion drone batteries are completely banned from checked bags, and if they're found there, they can be pulled and confiscated without you ever being present, so you only realize what happened when you land and open your suitcase. Even in your carry-on, drones are under heavy scrutiny because if a battery is oversized, unlabeled, looks modified, or doesn't clearly show its watt-hour rating, TSA officers are trained to remove it, and pro-level batteries over 160 watt-hours are an instant stop, while third-party batteries with no visible specs are another common loss. But there's an extra layer here most travelers don't think about. Drones attract attention on their own, as a drone with no registration markings, exposed wiring, DIY modifications, or anything that looks custom can quickly shift from travel gadget to suspicious device, and in some airports, and especially internationally, that alone is enough to trigger confiscation or extended questioning. And once again, the final call belongs to the officer, because if they're not comfortable with what they're seeing, your drone doesn't fly no matter how much it cost you. So in 2026, drones need to look factory clean, fully labeled, and battery compliant, because anything else is an expensive gamble, which brings us to number 9, hidden cameras and spy gear. Legal doesn't mean safe, and this category is niche, but when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong, because hidden cameras and spy-style electronics aren't explicitly banned by TSA rules, and that technicality is exactly what gets people into trouble in 2026, as we're talking about devices like pen cameras, USB chargers with hidden lenses, clocks with concealed recorders, anything that looks like one object but contains the components of another. And here's the problem. The new CT scanners are designed to spot anomalies, and a device that doesn't match what it visually claims to be is the textbook definition of an anomaly. So when the scanner sees a charger with camera wiring inside or a pen with a battery, lens, and storage chip, it gets flagged immediately, which triggers a mandatory bag check and a very close inspection, and at that point, you'll be asked to explain what it is and why you're carrying it, and if the explanation isn't clear, the device looks modified, or it appears homemade in any way, the officer has full authority to confiscate it, because from TSA's perspective, disguised electronics are a potential threat, not a novelty, and even if you have a legitimate reason, you're inviting scrutiny you probably don't want, and if you hesitate, get defensive, or can't explain it calmly, the odds shift against you fast. The safest move in 2026 is simple: don't travel with hidden electronics at all, because being technically allowed doesn't protect you when an officer isn't comfortable with what they're seeing, which brings us to number 10, rechargeable plasma lighters. And the TSA-friendly lie, because this last one catches people since it sounds modern, safe, and approved, as rechargeable plasma lighters, also called arc lighters, are often marketed as TSA-friendly, but in 2026, that label is dangerously misleading, and here's the reality. Traditional disposable lighters are generally allowed in carry-on bags, but plasma lighters are different because they're battery-powered devices designed to generate intense heat, and that combination makes both the TSA and FAA extremely cautious. And on paper, TSA guidance says electronic lighters may be allowed in carry-on bags if they're protected from accidental activation, but in practice, enforcement is all over the place, so at one airport, an officer might let it through while at the next, the same device goes straight into the bin. And why? Because the final decision always belongs to the officer, and in 2026, officers are trained to avoid risk, not debate policy nuances. Anything with a lithium-ion battery whose sole purpose is to create heat gets extra scrutiny, and with the heightened focus on battery-powered electronics this year, plasma lighters are being confiscated more often than travelers expect, so the safe move is boring but reliable. Skip the fancy gadget and stick with a simple disposable lighter, because it's cheaper, clearer under the scanner, and far less likely to get taken. And here's the real takeaway that most people don't connect until it's too late. In 2026, anything with a lithium-ion battery is under a microscope, including smart luggage, power banks, vapes, grooming tools, even toothbrushes. If it's damaged, unlabeled, unprotected, or looks modified, it becomes a problem fast, because the scanners don't care how long you've traveled with it before, and officers aren't required to give warnings anymore, so a few minutes of checking your gear at home, removing batteries, labeling power banks, and packing correctly can save you from losing expensive equipment and missing flights, as airport security isn't getting easier. It's getting smarter, and if you've ever had something confiscated, share your experience in the comments because it might save another traveler from the same mistake. And if this helped, subscribe so you're not caught off guard next time. So stay prepared, stay informed, and fly smart.